Architecture and Structures of Consciousness, a personal intellectual biography by John Lobell. So, in doing my book on visionary creativity, looking at education, I came to the conclusion a good education should provide a framework into which one can weave what one will do for the rest of one's life. Let's see how that works for me. I studied architecture at the University of Pennsylvania. At the time, it was known as the Philadelphia School, about which I wrote a book published by Routledge. And among my professors, Robert Venturi, Denise Scott Brown, Louis Kahn, I didn't take his studio, but he was a presence. Ed Bacon, Perkins, William Fontaine, Ian McHarg created a framework into which I've been able to weave what I've done since. Got to New York and encountered a plethora of approaches to architecture. Someone has yet to write a book like Lee Smollen's The Trouble with Physics about the problems of these approaches, which I did not get involved in pursuing my own independent studies under Perkins at Penn, resulting in Architecture and Structures of Consciousness. Architecture manifests the underlying structures of its culture. The underlying structures of a culture, space-time, etc., are generated by structures of consciousness. I had two sources in my work. The most important book of the first half of the 20th century, also Spengler's Decline of the West, and the most important work of the second half of the 20th century, Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media. Spengler rejects Eurocentrism, rejects the division of history into ancient, medieval, modern. So 9 distinct high cultures, each with a prime symbol or cultural psychology, and each unfolds in a seasonal or organic analogy. Prime symbol, India, this world is an illusion, there's a transcendent oneness. China, a harmony with the way of all things. The Levant, this world was created by a creator who left instructions. Greece, the emergence of the individual, the importance of the bodily whole. The West, the conquest of infinite space. Culture begins by laying down its epic poem. The epic poems describe the moral character of the ideal person. The temple form delineates the nature of the metaphorical and actual space in which one moves. McLuhan, 1964, this book exploded into the cultural consciousness. Understanding media, the extensions of man. The medium is the message. The technology restructures our consciousness. Its content is unimportant. Oral, the phonetic alphabet, the printing press, the electric net, television, the computer, artificial intelligence. Each rewires the brain and restructures our consciousness. McLuhan writes, after 3,000 years of explosion by means of fragmentary mechanical technology, the Western world is imploding. During the mechanical ages, we had extended our bodies in space. Today, after more than a century of electronic technology, we have extended our central nervous systems into a global embrace, abolishing both space and time as far as the planet is concerned. Rapidly, we approach the final phase of the extension of man, the technological simulation of consciousness, where the creative process of knowing will be collectively and corporately extended into the whole of human society. much as we have already extended our senses and our nerves by various media. So McLuhan described the effects of the home computer a dozen years before the Apple II, the Internet 2 dozen years before the World Wide Web, social media 3 dozen years before Facebook, artificial intelligence 5 dozen years before ChatGPT. McLuhan's importance is not just in predicting these, but in describing their effects. So I spent months with Spengler and McLuhan. If I accepted both, what did they have in common? What brought them together? Well, I eventually arrived at structures of consciousness, a theory of how our consciousness works and how it's structured would encompass, embrace both of these books. Our consciousness creates the world we experience. That world has underlying structures. Those structures are generated by the structures of our consciousness. Arts and sciences change due to changes in structures of consciousness. Technologies, media play a major role in changes in structures of consciousness. Space and time, important to architects, are examples of underlying structures. Newtonian space and time parallel that in perspective painting. In a sense, relativistic space and time parallels that in cubism. Space and time change and are different in different cultures. Kuhn calls such changes paradigm shifts, but cannot say what causes them. They are cultural. They're caused by changes in structures of consciousness, which Kuhn cannot address. Building up to this, Immanuel Kant, we cannot know the thing in itself, only the phenomena of what we perceive. Everything is characterized by, he says, Newtonian space and time. Thus, these are characteristics of mind. Hegel tells us things change. Reason, history is a reflection of the evolutionary spirit. Marx says, I stand Hegel on his feet. Culture is changed not by changes in spirit, but changes in the material means of production. Gregory Lukács studies changes in consciousness, but is forced to recant by the party. Frankfurt School takes up the study of consciousness. Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shifts, a scientific studies of space and time, etc., change. That's fundamental to my work, but I was not aware of Kuhn when I did my work, but arrived at the same conclusions through Ernst Marshall McLuhan, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, Siegfried Gideon, Vincent Scully, etc., later confirmed by Stephen Hawking, Stephen Wolfram, etc. So Maurice Merleau-Ponty, a phenomenologist, describes how the phenomenal world is generated by our subjectivity, which is not just cognition, but includes the body subject. McLuhan tells us that media acts as extensions of the body, as well as the mind. Anton Ehrenreich explains how low-res fragments of perception are organized by cognition. Space, time, etc. change because cognition, structures of consciousness, changes. More recently, Ray Kurzweil and Jeff Hawkins have confirmed that Anton Ehrenreich, who worked through the arts, they work through neurophysiology. Whereas Peckham tells us that art alters structures of consciousness through discontinuities, the differences between what one anticipates and encounters. Campbell picks up with others in his The masks of 4 volumes of masks of God consciousness is structured differently in different cultures. My studies of other traditions included Tai Chi and Taoism with Chin and Chen, mythology with Campbell, Buddhism with Chingam Trungpa, and shamanism with Michael Hunter, culminating in my architecture and structures of consciousness, underlying structures of the phenomenal world, space-time, etc., change because structures of consciousness change. My position in some ways parallels that of the postmodernists. It differs in that it avoids groupthink and nihilism, is more historical, looks to non-Western cultures as broader sources, including history of science, Buddhism, and Taoism. So there are two social traditions of social studies. Rationalism deriving from Descartes and patterns of meaning deriving from Vico. I follow in Vico's tradition, as does Mies, who writes, architecture is a real battleground of the spirit. Architecture depends on its time. It is the crystallization of its times and its structure, the slow unfolding of its form. And right, every architect is necessarily a great poet. He must be a great original interpreter of his time, his day, his age. So this notion of structures of consciousness has served my teaching. Architecture is culture manifested in form. By Western cultures, the culture begins to lay down its temple form and its epic poems. Western cultures, from medieval to contemporary, how space and time change. Frank Lloyd Wright, just looking at these plans, seeing him in broad cultural context, which is he more similar to? Very common parallels to Eastern thought. Very Khan's buildings, which are a generative manifestation of his philosophy. Venturi and Scott Brown, History, Archetypes, and Popular Culture. Ism and Deconstruction as a reflection of discordance in the culture in general. The impact of technology course, interplay between new technologies, culture, and structures of consciousness. My work, minimal sculpture, environmental sculpture, architecture and cultural criticism, high-tech startups, and creativity are all built on this foundation. My studies in these other cultures lead me to look at Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. Do you think he can take over the universe and improve it? I do not think it can be done. Contrast that with Ray Kurzweil. The explosive exponential growth means it will only take a quarter of a millennium to go from sending messages on horseback to saturate the matter energy of our solar system with sublimely intelligent processes. All this unfolds in my books. And the question now, as Mark Andreessen observes, software is eating the world. The challenge now is to apply this approach to the rule-based structures of today's world, taking into account speculative conditions of the late culture, McLuhan's digital technologies extension, and what are the contemporary structures of culture and structures of consciousness. Thank you.